was staying in Africa, where, as a sign that relations between Ethiopia, Somalia is improving, the Ethiopian ambassador Suleiman Didefo presented his credentials to Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. Both nations had been embroiled in a bitter row prompted by Ethiopia's quest for sea access from Somaliland, a breakaway region of Somalia. The deal was rejected by Somalia, which considers Somaliland its sovereign territory. It accused Ethiopia of violating its territorial integrity, and tensions only eased after Turkey's mediation. In December 2024, the leaders signed the Ankara Declaration, which included a commitment to hold talks over Ethiopia's search for sea access. In April 2024, Somalia expelled Ethiopia's ambassador, declaring him persona non grata, and gave him 72 hours to leave the country. The latest developments seem to indicate the two Horn of African neighbors are inching towards better relations. Now, for more on Ethiopia-Somali relations, African affairs analyst Amuda Musibudi joins me here in Lagos State. Good to have you join us, Amuda.
Thank you for having me.
So after the Ankara Declaration, we are now seeing the restoration of ties. Ambassadors have now been recalled to both countries. Is this a new era for Ethiopia and Somaliland, as well as the Horn of Africa?
Well, definitely it's going to be, a new phase, definitely, because we know that relations between the two countries broke down last year, and there were attempts at restoring it towards late last year with the Ankara Declaration, the meetings in Ankara, in Turkey, late last year. And so with this restoration, it means that that would enhance relations. However, it also has its dynamics. Don't forget that these what led to this in the first place was the attempt by Ethiopia to maintain its dominant influence in the Horn of Africa against what some other countries, particularly what we can call the Somali, Eritrea, Egypt, tripartite alliance, is trying to forestall so as to keep Ethiopia at bay. But with what we have seen now, it means that the Egypt-Eritrea alliance would have to be more strengthened, because the Ankara Declaration, one of the elements of the Ankara Declaration is the access to the Red Sea, which is what Egypt and Eritrea have been trying to block for Ethiopia, a landlocked country, for a long time. But with this declaration and this move, by Ethiopia, and of course, with the restoration of relations, it means it's a win-win situation for Ethiopia. Don't forget that at the moment, Ethiopia is still also holding its bargaining chip, which is, its recognition for Somaliland. And one of the grounds by Somalia has been that Ethiopia has to withdraw its passive support for regions and recognition of the federal government as a legitimate authority in the country. So this action is coming as a win-win for Ethiopia, but I doubt if it is same for Somalia in this sense. Rather, I feel that Somalia is becoming a pawn in this whole scheme of things.
And I hear you, because you make very interesting points there. While it seems like progress has been made, I just want to ask you, again, the issue around Somaliland, has the tension regarding the specific details of this agreement, which is for both countries to now try and find access to some sort of body of water for Ethiopia, and then the future status of Somaliland, has that been addressed?
It has not been addressed. It was not even addressed in the in the Ankara agreement as well. It seemed like Ethiopia is negotiating from the place of strength, and that is why, if you look at the agreements that were reached, Ethiopia is still holding on to, like I said earlier, the bargaining chip, which is recognition for Somaliland. And as long as there is that continued recognition, for Somaliland by Ethiopia, the first country to do that anyways, it means that eventually Somaliland will get to a point of gaining its independence. Don't forget that Somalia has also reacted with its own, alliance with Eritrea, without forgetting the fisticuff and the bad blood between Eritrea and Ethiopia, knowing full well that Eritrea was a country that also, moved out of Ethiopia. So there are so many issues that are still gray, so many gray areas that are unattended to, in the hope that the two parties will act more maturely and for the interest of the Horn of Africa in this regard.
It would seem as though in that Ankara agreement, Ethiopia was the only one that got what it wanted. And so I'm wondering, Somalia doesn't really have the capacity that Ethiopia has. You and I have talked so much about being surrounded by predatory neighbors. It would also seem like that's the case for Somalia now, as we saw in the DRC as well.
It's just unfortunate. Somalia is the loser. That's just the plain truth. Somalia is the loser in this agreement. Because if you look at it, now, one would have expected that one of the terms of the agreement would be that Ethiopia would withdraw its recognition for Somaliland and will also withdraw its passive support for those regional governments in Somalia. But rather what Ethiopia agreed to was that, okay, no problem, but did not say anything about the recognition of Somaliland. So that means that Somaliland becomes a bargaining chip by Ethiopia anytime. It's just a bargaining chip to whip Somalia into line. Anytime there's going to be breakdown of agreements, all Ethiopia needs to do is to say, hey, we have not cancelled our recognition for Somaliland, and then they will just reinitiate such relations with Somaliland, and that does not bode well for the central government in Somalia. So Somalia is the ultimate loser in this agreement and the whole thing that is panning out.
And in terms of just recognizing secessionist movements and groups, across Africa, we've seen that with El Sahrawi in Morocco, and how that has also been a bargaining chip within Africa. Why has African Union not come up with some level of protocol to say this is the rule? If they are going to be recognized, at least there should be maybe a referendum or some legal process by any country. And if any other country in Africa recognizes a secessionist movement without that protocol, there should be sanctions for it.
Unfortunately, the AU has largely been a paper tiger in terms of actions, activities, and resolutions. And in fact, in terms of executing whatever resolutions that has been made, by any of its institutions, because these are serious issues. It's not just in Ethiopia, as you have said. We see what is also playing out in East Africa as well. We see what is playing out in Southern Africa. So these issues keep recurring, but the AU seem helpless, and maybe because the internal wranglings within the AU, the whole quest for dominant influence among some major blocs within the AU is what is causing this. We know how strong the days of OAU, such resolutions would have been reached, but then it seemed like we have gone back to Golgotha. That's just the reality here. So the AU seem like toothless in every sense of the word, because they needed to make a very firm resolution calling on these countries because you cannot keep promoting terrorist groups in other countries just because you want to fester your own influence within the region. It will not bode well for the peace of the continent at large.
You know what they say about those in glass house not throwing stones. Ethiopia has one of the largest secessionist movements in Africa, about 4 or 5 of them, Tigray, Amhara, and it seems to be, I wonder what it would do if other countries were to recognize them as well. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to have you on. African Affairs Analyst, Amuda Musibudi.
You're most welcome.